Hi everyone, welcome to the second session of today. And the sun is out and the energy is back to high, so that's lovely to see. Thank you for joining us in this panel discussion. We're going to keep our presentations quite short because really what we want to do is to have as much as possible a conversation with you here in the tent about these two really important issues. I'm sure you'll have been at, so many sessions already. And the message that we keep hearing is that the evidence, it's kind of there. We know what works. So why isn't this regen ag spreading even more? I mean, it is already going like wildfire, but what can we do to make it even more powerful? So this is really the topic of our session. So we're going to do some very brief introductions at first, and then get straight into a discussion between us and also with you. So yeah, let me start. So I'll start by saying a couple of words about myself. I'm Anna Krzywoszynska. I'm an associate professor in anthropology at the University of Oulu in Finland. I just recently kind of left the UK after most of my academic career here. And I'm an environmental social scientist, really. So what that means is that I study how we make knowledge about nature and how the differences in how we make knowledge in different communities then come to matter. And I have been studying the regen ag community really in the UK since its beginnings, since it was still calling itself the no-till or conservation ag, and then other terms, and now we've landed into this regen ag sort of embracing term. So I've been following with a huge amount of interest how farmers are producing knowledge that is useful to them. And this is maybe a bit of a red thread for this session. Just to mention a couple of research interests that I have at the moment, which are kind of illustrated by these pictures on the slides. I'm very interested in what is going on with the soil carbon policies, soil carbon markets, soil carbon certification, and how this massive investment in understanding soils and farms primarily through the lens of carbon, what kind of consequences these structures are going to have on what it means to be a farmer, what it means to manage land, and frankly, how can we resist these big forces, and how can we maintain and strengthen what I have been seeing in the regen ag transition from the beginning, which is a transformation and a learning that is sensitive to place, that starts from a particular site and that starts from a particular group of people. So a particular farmer with their particular family over a particular community who are interested in making the situation better, not just improving the environment, but improving the environment for themselves. So this holistic understanding of sustainability as something that is both environmental, economic, because it supports a livelihood, and social, because it brings a continuity of human life and of human well-being and of human happiness in a specific place. So these are the questions that are central to my work, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. Abby.
Hi. So I'm Abby Rose. Nice to see you all. And there are many overlaps in the questions that Anna asks and the questions I'm asking, I would say. In some ways, the conversation today is really well suited to me because it's both about creating an evidence base, but also some of the enthusiasm and storytelling that's required to bring people on board to the Regen Ag movement, and I'm involved in both of those. So just a bit about one of the things you can see on the screen now is an app I helped develop called Soil Mentor, and it's very much about farmers having the agency to be able to go and look at soils for themselves and learn, what does it mean to have good soil health? What does it mean? What does it look like to have good soil health? Because often, if you get a lab test result, it's just a bit of some numbers, kind of like the carbon markets in a way, it's some numbers. And that's actually sometimes quite difficult to interrogate. So this is very much about observation and the power of observation and the agency that can bring with it. So by looking, you actually get a new layer of learning and information, and just how valuable that is. So that's what we really tried to do through Soil Mentor, and we partnered with a lady called Nicole Masters, who, if you haven't heard of her, I highly recommend her book, For the Love of Soil. It's a really excellent read. And she helped us compile the 10 regen indicators. I think I listed them. Yeah, I've listed some of them on there, but they're simple things like earthworm counts, rooting depth, legume nodulation. And really our app just supports you in learning from those, and seeing how trends over time on your specific farm change. So that's what Soil Mentor is about. And then alongside that, I make a podcast called Farmerama. And that's very much been about storytelling, because I guess just the context for why both. My family started farming when I was about 18 years old, and I started visiting the farm, and I just had so many questions, and most of them was impossible to answer, and it was not clear who to ask either. This was back in like 2006, 7, so it was like very early regen ag movement. And so I started to, need tools to be able to track what was happening on the farm, and that was where the apps came from. But at the same time, also needed to be able to go and ask people questions. And that's really where the podcast came from. It was like, how can I go and learn from all the other people who are doing good things? And then how can we share that knowledge as quickly and easily as possible and tell those stories so that others can learn from it at the same time? So yeah, those two things side by side have been where I focused my attention. And I think we'll dig more into that kind of stuff in a bit.
Great. Thanks, Abby. Over to you, Cindie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindie. I am based in Copenhagen, Denmark. Some of you might know Denmark these days. A lot in the media of the farming tax. Have many opinions about that. It's not going to be now. We are one of the most cultivated countries in Europe, in Denmark. We produce mostly feed for animals. Having such a big amount of agriculture also means that if you are a Dane, most of your family has been or are in agriculture, and the same goes for me. My grandparents, my uncles, and so forth. They are all in conventional agriculture, so we do have really interesting dinners sometimes, where we view the different ways of doing agriculture. Today I'm here because I am, first of all, I will tell you about this project you see in front of you, but I'm also leading a non-profit organization called Foodprint Nordic, and we are still based in Copenhagen. We are a hospitality-led organization where we work with canteens, restaurants, wholesalers, where they redirect 1% to regenerative agriculture projects. So farmers can apply for grants in Foodprint Nordic. We are not a typical funding organization because we don't back safe projects where we can tell the outcomes. We want to close the gap where I see capital is needed, where we need to do more innovation, or we just need to try new things, where the access is easy to money. So that's what we're trying to do with Top 50 Farmers. Being from Denmark also means that I've been part of what we call the Nordic gastronomy rise. Not astronomy, but gastronomy. And 20 years ago, we did not really have a food culture in Denmark. I think if you went to the US, most people would know Denmark for the bacon. That was kind of it. But the last 20 years, we have seen that chef became famous. People are traveling to Denmark just to eat. I would, maybe some of you would be able to name a chef today. I don't think in the broader society people can mention as many farmers still, which I found very interesting, to be honest. So I was invited 2 years ago to do a keynote in Denmark about regen ag. And in one of the breakout sessions, we talked about this, like how this rise of the Nordic gastronomy gave chefs a new opportunities. It gave them a new platform. It gave them a voice, a different voice that we have seen before. And we discussed, like, why can't we do the same for farmers? It makes absolutely no sense that society only knows the chefs and not the farmers. And we were discussing, like, how could we actually do this? So I don't know if you know the initiative called the World's 50 Best, for example, where you nominate restaurants in the world, and people travel to go to these restaurants. And we got inspired from that, and we created the project called Top 50 Farmers that will launch this November, actually. So you could say it's a spin of the World's 50 Best, but we're not going to rank farmers. We're not going to rank farms as they do. I don't think that's important, but I do think it's important to showcase role models, diverse role models in agriculture. I do think it's really important to talk about the stories that we see out there. I think that we have enough science, I would say now. I think the next move is to see what's already being done out there to inspire, and not the least to change the awareness about agriculture. I still feel that there's so much negative talk about agriculture. I want to be part of that change where we talk about it in a new way, where we do see the benefits. And I think we can do that with telling the cases on ground and get those people out there. I think a farmer mentioned yesterday that farmers has been pushed out of society, but they need to be the heart of society. And I do think that's really like what we want to do with Top 50 Farmers. So the project gonna launch in November, where we do an open call through Europe, including UK, where everybody can nominate a farmer. And then we're gonna simply choose 50 farmers to be representative in the beginning, and we're gonna splash out the good stories about what's being done. It's also going to be a platform where we can gather organizations, because what I think is also needed right now is, like, if you want to go into the space as a farmer organizations, like, where do you go right now? It'd be nice to have a platform in a local context based on countries to see, oh, these are the organizations working in the space now, or these are the farmers. So trying to gather also the initiatives and projects and just telling some really good stories to change the way we see agriculture.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cindie. And our last panel, last but definitely not least, Tom.
Hello, thanks very much, everybody. My name is Tom Edmondson, and I farm about an hour from here, just outside Milton Keynes, together with my wife, Mary. I've been asked to come on this panel because we've been through quite a journey from a very, very conventional mindset over the last 20 years since I left agricultural college, through a series of jobs within the agricultural supply chain and farm advisory work. I spent, after I left college in 2005, I spent time doing those kind of roles and sort of working with that conventional mindset, maximum input, maximum output. In 2012, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to take over the home farm, which I grabbed with open arms. The gentleman that was farming it before us was very conventional. He had had enough of the farming hamster wheel and said, the first week in August, when I finished cutting your wheat, we are leaving. So it was a snap decision. Let's do this, because if we don't say yes now, what are we going to do? So we went straight in with a very conventional mindset. We bought a Vadestat drill, and we bought a big tractor, and we bought a nice cultivator, and we went and stirred up all the soil and drilled our wheat crops. The headlands all failed. There was black grass everywhere. And I thought, well, I've obviously not put enough of this chemical or that chemical or the other chemical on. And my agronomist, who's a very old friend, said, well, yeah, we'll try a few different things. Why don't we try reducing, doing minimum tillage rather than maximum tillage? Why don't we try stale seed beds? Lots of applications of glyphosate. And I found myself sat on a sprayer a lot, and I hated it. You spend all day killing things, and there's no joy in that. And I thought, well, I've always wanted to be a farmer, and now I've got it, and I don't actually like it. It's not a lot of fun, but I committed to it. So we went through a few series of introspection and sort of looking at what we were doing and seeing the parts of it we did actually enjoy. And we sort of started focusing on that rather than what was going wrong. So in the picture here, you can see this is my first foray into regenerative farming. It's a few years old now, and that was a wild bird seed mix. It had, what did it have in it? Buckwheat, linseed, mustard, lots of flowering species, and I started with a big failure. So I planted this, it looked lovely, it all went to flower, and then it all went to seed, and then it all set seed on the ground, and then I thought, oh, blimey, what am I going to do with this? So rather than having a negative mindset, we thought, well, okay, we'll roll this. So we rolled it, it regrew again, and then the following year, we started digging the soil up, and it changed from lifeless. When we ploughed it in that first year, it came over like bins. It was horrible, and it's heavy clay soil. It was a solid lump, came out the back of the plough, and out the back of these lumps grew black grass. So that's why we planted this crop. And so, well, okay, what do we do? So we planted this, and then we grazed. It's got buckwheat in there, and I'm sure some people who graze will know that you can't graze buckwheat with sheep. It turns out when it's dead, you can, but as long as it's not the only thing they've got to eat, you're okay. But so we grazed that, and then 2 years later, after it had been out of production, the soil's a completely different thing. It smelled like soil. It was supposed to smell. I stopped looking at it as sand, silt and clay and started realising there's life within this soil. And that sort of fueled me to go out and do, I didn't know why it had changed. I wasn't aware. I hadn't got the knowledge at that point to know what difference I'd made and how what results had been caused by what I'd done. So I started going, right, okay, let's look into a few things. So I started reading a few books. I found Gabe Brown. I found Nicole Masters, and I started sort of looking at things in a different way. Whilst this was all going on the arable side of things, we also had pigs. We were contract fattening 2,000 pigs alongside day jobs at the same time as well. So we were quite busy, and we were direct marketing to customers just outside Milton Keynes. That's our unfair advantage. We've got 350,000 people on the doorstep who want to buy local meat. Well, some do, some don't. But you only need a small percentage of that population to be successful. So we started doing that. And then the customers started asking questions about our production system. Where's it coming from? We were doing it, they were outdoor bred, and they were on grass-based finishing system. And they liked it, but they didn't like the system. So we thought, okay, we'll start changing that. And you realise that the general public want regen food, and you can provide that, and then you become this linchpin in this community where you are able to provide. We now produce beef and lamb and eggs and pork, and we're not doing any cereals. My wife makes sourdough bread in the shop, and we've become this linchpin, and we've created a community around us of people that actually want what we produce and seek it out. And that has fueled so many more positive changes in our business and in our life. You've stopped being a farmer on the outside of the community when we used to be central to the community, and now we realise actually we are part of that. And we produce what people want, and it changes everything for you and for that community. The benefit you see with these people that come into your shop every week, you form relationships and you see the positive change you create within them, and it just fuels the fire in doing more. It's amazing. Such a change in mindset from being conventional.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tom. And I don't know, some of you may have been in the session before, but in my work, I've interviewed a lot of farmers who have gone through this transition, and they always talk about this kind of a moment, the light bulb moment, like, what the hell am I doing? I'm sitting on a tractor going up and down the field, and I feel miserable, and I'm making everybody else miserable, and I'm not seeing my kids, and why isn't there another way? And that often is the first step. But Abby, you've spoken to so many farmers in Farmerama, and you've seen so many go through the Soil Mentor. What do you feel is often the first thing that's needed to start this regen ag transition on the farm?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think there isn't one first thing, is the reality. So like, if diversity is one of the core principles of regenerative agriculture, then I think that also applies to mindset. In essentially, what you talked about there it's a mindset shift that's required. But how do you get someone to have a mindset shift that is very, very varied and requires a real diversity of approaches, in my view? Yeah, like I guess Tom and I had a conversation about the cereal series on Farmerama, and that was one of the things that allowed you to kind of see what was possible in terms of the bread making on the farm and growing a heritage grain and an alternative food system that you could be part of. So in some ways, sometimes it's allowing the new stories, helping people create new stories that they can be part of. And I think that is one of the things. On the other hand, I also think you can see that even in your story there, Tom, it was like a few moments of confidence building were what allowed you to keep going and to propel forward. And I think what are those things that we can do that help people just have that moment of confidence where you're like, oh, the soil looks different or it smells different. What does that mean? And then
to recognize success, to recognize the positive change.
Exactly, to see that, have that moment, because I think it can be really bleak out there as well. Like I've definitely had the experience of things not working a lot. So it's those moments of things working and just having that experience that I think is one of the keys to helping people to get going. And how can we create those moments of confidence?
It's sort of a series of lots of tiny things happening, and I was going to mention cereals and the Farm Around the Pod series, Cereals. We listened to it at the beginning of lockdown, which was fun, wasn't it? That was a dark, lonely place. As a farmer, we were in an extremely privileged position because we were in the countryside. We're very lucky for that, but still, the whole world is shut down. People are hungry for food. They can't get food in the supermarkets. They're sort of knocking your door down, trying to get something to eat, and you can see this whole food system collapsing and the reliance people have on supermarkets. And when that's taken away, how it just collapses for these people, and we were, we still do work all hours, but you're working daylight hours trying to get food on people's tables. They're hungry and they want it, and you form in these relationships. And then we thought, in the sort of in between times, we're reading and listening to podcasts, we listen to Cereals, and it's one of those moments where you realise actually there are other people out there doing this. You're not the only one. You're not alone. There is a community out there. You come to Groundswell. My first year was 2018. It was in the sheds over there, and you come year on year and see it get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you sit down on an evening and talk to people, and you form these longer term relationships based around positive thinking, and it's just such a different mindset at this festival. It's such an amazing community and opportunity, and surround yourself with those people drives positive change.
That's really interesting. That was kind of spoken about if you were listening to John Kempf yesterday in his fireside chat. He was talking quite a lot about this importance of relations. And what you're saying is, it's one thing to be producing crop for the global market where you can have this idea, okay, somebody somewhere needs it, but it's very different to when you're producing for people that come to your bakery or to your shop. That's a different quality of relationship. And same thing, it's one thing to say, oh, well, I'm doing something good for the environment because I'm building up my soil health, but to have other farmers come and talk to you about it in person on Groundswell, it's a different quality of relationship. But to come back to what Abby was saying about these moments of recognition of success and the recognition of I really like how you put it, that there is you encounter a story that you can become part of. Like you can imagine yourself being part of a different narrative, and that is something that allows the farmer, the grower to start a step towards transition, because they don't have to do everything themselves. It's like it's not laid out, but there is a direction, there is an inspiration. It feels very much like what you're trying to do, Cindie, with Top 50 Farmers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the inspiration is key, but I also want to talk a little bit about like what we talk a lot about the transition for farmers, right? But what we also see in Foodprint Nordic right now with farmers actually applying for funds to projects is they don't come from a farming background. The majority is academics who is coming into the space, and they're not
fed up with academia.
No, but also like high position jobs in corporate stuff like that, right? And I think often when we ask them like, why are you doing this? It's not often because of like, or climate or something like that, but they were inspired. They were like, oh, this is so cool. We also want to live like that. We also want to do it like that. So while we have a lot to transition, we are also looking at and another group of people who is coming into the space and actually starting from the beginning, and they need to see good cases. They need to see that this is possible. People have done it before. So I think the inspiration and the cases are very important for all groups, actually.
That's such a good point, and maybe it's sort of under-recognized also that we are having a problem with succession, and we can't count just on the farming daughters and sons to be coming forward to fill the succession gap. We do need to widen the scope, and I love what you said, that this is about somebody looking and saying, I want to live like that. I think that's really powerful, but this is not, this is the job that I want. This is really recognizing that farming is a life. Yes. So my next kind of question to raise here then is, what happens in these bleak moments? What happens when you are in the midst of trying to find your feet and trying to build a livelihood and to build a life? What are the things that are needed? What are the things that farmers need to continue, to persist, to persevere, and to get to a sort of stable? I know, farmers never stable. It's always like one disaster after another. But you get better. You get better at the whitewater rafting, right? So, what happens? What is needed? What do you think are the things that are the most helpful to help people reach this steady state? Big question.
I mean, Tom, you're probably best placed to answer that because, but I can certainly talk from my experience. I guess it's similar to bleak moments in life in general, but it is about it's about the relationships and not feeling like you're on your own, and being able to share. We talked a little bit about this before, actually, that one of the things that's possible within the regen ag movement, and not everyone may agree with this, is that there's a little more space for emotional sharing and a little more space for a conversation that's about what it means to be human in a whole sense, not just that this is a business. Not just the producer. Yeah. Because of course farms are businesses, and in the UK anyway, majority of farms are businesses, and we can't forget that. And so farms are accountable to profit. That is the underlying reality. But at the same time, there is space in business for emotion, and to be able to bring your whole self. And for our business, for example, VitaCycle, we say we're building ecology, profitability, and beauty. And that word beauty, I remember when I first said it, I was really scared because it felt like bringing that word out was a bit woo-woo, or I don't know, too much, not appreciated in the business world. But actually, that was in 2018, 2019 that we started using that word. And actually, the number of conversations I've had where people are like, oh, it's so great, that gives me space to have other conversations. Or yes, the reason I farm is because some days it's just beautiful to be on the farm, or it is a life. There's something to farming that is a little more than just productivity. And how can we allow that space? And I think so in those bleaker moments, I would think that, or I've seen definitely that the conversations that have been allowed to happen are more in that beauty space. They're more in the emotional space, and it's allowing that kind of sharing that is vital to move forward, I would say. I don't know if you agree with that, Tom.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what Tom has to say also as a man, as a guy. This is hard. The cultural barrier is huge.
I've still got friends I used to play rugby with that keep me very grounded, so it's fine. I'm not emotional with everybody, but I agree with what Abby says completely. Farmers it is a business, but it is also our life, it's our livelihood. We are also humans, but to disconnect the business from the life and the livelihood and the problems and the disasters sometimes is very difficult. And you have to be able to have access to that community, that friend, that person you can pick up the phone to share. Even sharing within your own family can be difficult, and that's a really big mindset shift, which is driven in some cases by being on the edge of a really dark place. Which during lockdown we were getting to that point, and Regen Ag and direct marketing to the consumer was a real lifeline for us when you realise actually there is value in what you do and people do value that, and that's a huge change. But us sat here talking about woo-woo, talking about feelings, talking about sharing, within this field, within this community here, it's a very open place. You go to cereals last week, you're not having that kind of conversation. It's a very different mindset, and it's all about max input, max output, and they can't afford to step off that hamster wheel, and it's not until they have a big moment of change or clarity that won't ever change, because we've learnt for all these years this is the way we farm. We don't realise there's another way, and if we can provide those avenues for people to find this information, to see people that are doing it, that have been through these changes in their lives, and it is okay, and you can still make money, and you don't need to yield 12 tons a week 12 tons a hectare of wheat. There is other ways to do these things. Then great, brilliant, but we can't go too woo-woo with it, because otherwise we'll put them off. The conventional farmer needs to be accessible to these people, and we need to keep the language at a level that isn't too emotional and is attainable and accessible to them, so they can start to just take those little moments and move forwards with those and be open to conversation and look across the hedge and see what I'm doing, however many years in we are now, and see the difference in our cereal, see the difference in our grass crops and our cows, and well, I've not used any wormers on those cows for 5 years, and it's, well, how have you managed that? And then those conversations open, and then the sky's the limit, really, and that fuels change within your community, and it's all about sharing that.
Of course, the irony is that when farmers, conventional farmers get together in a pub and brag about yields, what are they doing? They are building a relationship. They are asserting their place in the community. They are looking for others to say, yeah, you're doing a good job. That's precisely, it's just still the same thing, but with different values.
Yeah, and we ask them to do that also, we have to recognize, right? But another point is so when you asked about what do we need for farmers to continue, I think it's still we need society to value farming, right? And I mentioned the farming tax in Denmark being announced right now. So farming tax, right? We are one of the countries that have the highest taxes. So having a farming tax that is paid by the citizens, it's not really creating a good and positive talk about agriculture. So while we can go deep and talk about the concrete things in that tax, is how do we create the value in society? How do we speak about it? I think that's really interesting. And putting farming taxes, I'm not sure that's convincing the citizens about how good farming is or agriculture is. So it's something that really it's on my mind these days. It's how do we change the conversation? How do we change the language about how we grow food and how it can be done in a way where we take care of our health and our nature? There's a very long way to go in that.
Well, that links to kind of our last questions for the panel here. And please, at any point, if you want to chip in or you feel moved to speak, please raise your hand. What is the thing that this community needs now? How can we, from our different positions, help Region Ag community grow? And one thing that I keep thinking about is what kind of evidence and what kind of stories, what form of narrative, what form of learning and community building do we need in order for Region Ag to grow and not be just the improvement of the environment, not be just the improvement of soil health, but be the movement that changes what it means to be a farmer, what it means to be a landowner, and what actually our agri-food system is like. And so then what it means to be a consumer, maybe you don't see it, I see it. This is the kernel of social change that can really make us all happier in all levels of society, whether you're a grower or whether you're an eater or anything in between, So, sorry, that's a very big, very big question. But from your different positions, what do you think is now needed? What can we do?
If I think about where I see the most success, or what I feel are the most successful projects going forward, or where I see these seeds of change that are big, really making waves. One of them we talked a little bit about it Groundswell last year as well, which is there's a group in the Netherlands called Common Land, and they are working at the landscape scale, and they have a 4 returns framework, but essentially they bring in, it's not just the farming community they work with the farming community and the business community and the educational community and the government, and they're bringing all of the actors together in a place, usually around 100,000 hectares. That's the kind of scale they're looking at. And then they're working together with all of those people, and they create a vision together. And then they have 20 years of catalytic funding, let's call it. So it's like small amounts of funding that allow the funding of, they can form businesses or NGOs or things to support those communities to reinvigorate that landscape. Because in a way, if we just think about farms, in a way you end up staying small, not to be mean, but it's like you end up focusing at a certain scale that means that the rest of the community can get left behind. And that's when you get the tensions, and the business community isn't happy about it or whatever. So by bringing everyone together at that scale and around landscape, to me, that's where you get real longevity of change. And I've seen, some really amazing stuff. They have 4 projects that are about 9 years in, one in Australia, South Africa, Spain, and the Netherlands. And it's really worth looking into those. We have some Farm Around episodes about them. And I'm seeing other projects like that coming from the arts community. Again, a group called Cooking Sections or Climavore, and they bring together people at that landscape scale. In the Isle of Skye is one of their key projects. And again, it's about forming businesses. It's about art projects. It's about education. All of that coming together around land-based practice. So to me, that's where I've seen the most hope and excitement going forward.
So kind of to summarize, where you're saying that what is kind of needed now is to slightly step out and shift the perspective and recognize that the regenerative agriculture on farm is sort of a first step towards the landscape scale regeneration of communities and lives that are linked to the farm but are not limited just to the farm. And when we start, there will be sessions this afternoon about landscape scale planning and collaboration, and I think we're starting to see these relationships coming in from different sort of interest groups, but to put it all together under a farm that is at the heart of a community, or farms that are at the heart of communities, farms that are at the heart of regenerating landscapes where people feel happy to be and live, and they don't want to go to the city. They want to stay here and build their business and have their kids go to school. Like you can, that's wonderful. But same question to our other panelists. What do you think we need going forward, and what can we do?
On a farmer scale, it's purely down to sharing, showing, doing, helping, being open, and talking. I can't. Legislation will get what legislation gets passed down to us. The new SL5 will change. The new payment rates may come or they may go. We'll see what happens when the government changes. But if you can make your farm and your business resilient through regenerative farming practice, then you are more, you're more able to weather that storm, and also the weather. The wettest year we've had in a very, very long time, and our farm with regenerative practices looks very different to our neighbours' farms, and they see that, and it's just being open to that. And I know it only changes it on a small community level, but that's where it starts, isn't it, really?
Yeah. So if you're doing something good or you're doing something bad, open your farm doors.
There's been lots of mistakes, but it's a change in mindset and looking at them as positive and opportunities, and not saying, that was a disaster, I drilled my grass too deep. I drilled my grass too deep the other week, and it's not come very well. And and I was it was going to be my new hay, my new hay area, and now we're going to graze it with cows. And we're sticking to one of the core principles of regenerative agriculture, which is getting cows back on the land. And the benefit from that will be huge. And so it's okay to make mistakes.
It is okay to make mistakes,
and everybody does. And so it's not all about focusing on the good; it's focusing on the whole.
Are you going to have disaster stories as part of Top 50?
No, I think we know those. I want to showcase the positive stories. I want to be able to show that we can make this happen. I think there's room for that. But I mean, what we need to do also is like, I'm really concerned about the generational gap overall. And again, back to like what we see here in Groundswell is not representative necessarily in ag overall when it comes to age. And again, back to like, how do we get the next generation into agriculture who are not already there, which I'm really interested in. So again, keep leading with diverse role models and show the diversity in age, gender, also in how a farm can look like, that it can be small, it can be bigger. You can, like, there's so many ways of doing this. And I do think that what's needed to be able to grow the movement and to get where we need to be. Yeah.
Well, we'd love to hear from you. Do you have your... This has become a sharing tent, so you can share your experiences, what you're part of. You can ask us questions, please. We have some time. Thank you.
Stand up. Oh.
Sharing is caring.
Hi, my name's Amelia. I'm a new entrant tenant farmer on a National Trust farm. Can you hear me? I was really inspired by what you said, Tom, because being a farmer myself. But my question is I work with a soil mentor app. Loving it. But how do we go into regen if we have low capital? Because being a new entrant tenant farmer, I think it's something that needs to be discussed. I have no money. I have no family farming either to trade in their tractor to buy the right seed that I need. So how am I starting this journey? I'm already organic certified. I'm already pasture-for-life certified, but I'm a weed farmer at the moment. So how do we do it if we've got no capital?
Have you got any livestock yet?
Yeah, we've got cattle, we've got pigs,
yeah.
But what is the first steps we can make into regen ag?
Are you set stocking at the moment?
Set stocking?
Yeah. Do you move your cows regularly, or?
We extensively graze them.
The first, other than failing and planting that crop that I got a positive out of by changing my mindset, from a grassland and a livestock point of view, the biggest change I made was amp grazing, mob grazing, whatever you want to call it. But we bought a single strand of polywire, some fencing stakes, and we just move our cows every single day. So they're not. The first 2 years we kept cows, I just let them have the whole field, and they gathered under the oak tree because it was nice and shaded, and they gathered around the drinking area, and they selectively grazed bits that they liked and left bits they didn't like. And then we ended up with a real range of some species of unpalatable grasses, some species of palatable grasses, but they weren't succeeding because it got poached or wet or whatever else. So I thought, well, how do we change this? And it was Greg Judy talking here in 2018 in a shed over there that I listened to, and it was just just get a wire, move them, and the rest will follow. And it really honestly did. It's the biggest impact I've had. We used to we make hay on one particular field, and I'd go and I'd put muck on that, and then we let it grow, and you get some docks and things growing in it. But through our changing grazing strategy, we're now, this year we've just made hay off of it this week, and it's had no inputs, no chemicals, no nothing. All we did was change the way we grazed it. And weeds are food. Your neighbours might think they're weeds, but actually, if you stop looking at them as weeds and start seeing them as something that is an indicator of what you've got going on under the ground, and look into that. There's a book called Weeds and What They Tell Us. I can't remember who it's by, but it's you can get it from Acres USA, and that tells you exactly what your species are of weed and what they tell you, and then you can start looking a bit deeper then. But start moving your cows.
That issue of investment, though, I thought that was really important. We have the podcast Investing in Regen Ag, but what are the investors doing? How do we make land accessible?
Yeah, the land is like another big issue, but I think we have to remember that while we try to change agriculture, we kind of have to change the whole financial system, right? And that is really what we have to do. And it also goes back to the investors. I mean, investing in this is not like the typical way of doing things. It's not the regular 10 years of return and so forth. There's so many things that need to be done. And while we're talking about also how to get society and all that excited about, this is like, I know from when we got funding for Top 50 Farmers, it's like very few foundations actually want to fund PR. It's not like really what they want to do, right? But it's what is needed also. So there's capital in so many ways. Like we need to tell the stories. We need farmers to be able to start with capital. And we need to look at the investors and of course government, but that will take a longer of talking about this risk that we have right now and how we're going to get there. But it's a whole financial system that we kind of need to look into.
Anna, I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe you can get together after the session and tell her a little bit about what you've done in the Netherlands in terms of setting up a foundation that supports region ag farmers to actually get a farm through low percentage loans. So these initiatives do exist, but I think that's not going to fall from the sky. Unfortunately, this is going to be hard work, but that's necessary. I think I saw a hand here first. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Malte. I'm from Denmark as well. I'm curious about the second part of the title of this session about building the evidence base of regenerative agriculture. Can you touch upon that?
Yeah. Also, Abby talked a little bit about it, I think, in terms of, this is something that I keep thinking about because, and that was again very well expressed by John Kampf yesterday, but we have a lot of scientific research, or increasingly we're having scientific research. And then we have a lot of anecdotal evidence in the sense that single observations and maybe written down or shared on YouTube, very valuable stuff. But the gap is what I like to think about as good enough evidence and farmer-led research. So I was talking about this in the previous session, universities are not going to do this. And private research institutions are not going to do this. And agrochemical companies are also not going to do this because they're not interested, because there's no profit in them, in you becoming more self-sustaining, and not needing inputs. So unfortunately, the truth is that nobody else is going to do this for the regen ag community. And the agroecology community, which has a slightly, longer history, they have started to have their own education and their own training, and they have started to pull resources together to fund their own research and to create their own procedures and to understand what forms of evidence are important for them to keep improving their practice. And I do feel like this is the step that Regen Ag is going towards, but it will again require somebody from the community to step up and say, this is what I'm going to dedicate my time to. And when that person comes forward, please talk to me, because I so want to be part of that.
Yeah, no, I love the work that you're doing, because I do think the whole with observations, like why is it not good enough? Like, as you say, Anna, is like we have evidence, we have lots of research, but observations, like I know from our projects, when we ask for these data, we of course ask for the typical ones, but we also ask for pictures. Can you show picture of the roots of the plant? That's, I would say, is evidence too, right? So it's observations. I would hope is going to be a big part of this scientific science.
Yeah, and I think, so having promoted that for many years now, I think one of the main barriers we've found is actually for people to value the time spent on observations. Because when you're farming, it's very easy to be like, oh, I'll go do that thing that's productive. And observing doesn't feel productive in our narrative. And that's actually a massive problem. We haven't valued observation for a long time. I mean, maybe some individuals have, but in general, in society, it's not. If you go into a farm and see someone just observing, what are you going to think? Oh, they're just chilling out, or, they're being lazy. That would be what people would say if they saw someone just observing. So it's part of the mindset shift in a way, is that actually your observations are unbelievably powerful and important. And when, some of the very best growers I know who have some of the most successful businesses, they do value observation. But it does take a bit of time to gain the confidence in your own observations. So obviously we're trying to support that through SoMentor. But I don't always know where to go or how we can support more farmers to feel like, observing is really key, and you will gain a lot from it. You just have to stick at it and you start to understand it in your own mind after a while. But at first, observing things, you're like, well, it's just grass. What am I going to do about it? So you start to build up a more nuanced understanding of things through those observations.
Please. Oh, although I think there was a hand at the back, and then we'll come back to the front. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Ido. I'm a compost tea producer and a consultant. I've been working the last 5-6 years with farmers. Your examples are very similar to what I work with, mostly with small, medium, and sometimes large farms. But when I try to knock on the door of large agricultural corporations, there's always a wall. Do you relate to these big corporations in your work? Or you focus on small farm, medium farms?
I'm going to speak from a position of a researcher. So when I'm researching regenerative agriculture or transitioning farmers, the issue is that you need a person somewhere who has a connection to the land where they can feel that something is wrong. And in big ag corporations, especially when they are run by absentee landowners, that person is a laborer who has no power in the system. So they can think that everything is broken and terrible, but they have no agency. So it's very hard for a big corporate, unless they have, and I have interviewed some individuals like that who are just farm managers, but who are in a situation of power, in a situation of trust in their organization. So if they said, we're going to try this, the shareholders or the landowners, they would support them. But that's not a usual situation. And that's a larger issue that I feel is also kind of a danger when we're talking about evidence and we're talking about the how much data is now being produced about farms and about the environment. I very much, this is kind of going a bit dystopic here, but not so much, as in it's quite realistic. I am worrying about situations where we're focusing just on environmental improvement and we're focusing just on productivity improvement, and these are the things that we're monitoring and these are the things that we're investing in on a state level, and we're gathering all of this data and we're seeing improvements, but we're leaving people out of the equation completely. And then what we're creating is basically a carte blanche for Amazon or another big corporate to come in and populate the fields with machines who make optimal decisions for the productivity, for even the environmental outcomes, but they have removed the farmers completely from society, and that is truly dystopic to me.
But I also just want to add, like, when you say you're knocking on the doors, like, why are we knocking on the doors? Like, I want to understand also, like, what is it that we want to understand from their side, right? Because as we talked about before, we do see agriculture as a bad thing. So when we knock on the door, the motivation of talking about what they're doing is maybe not the biggest, because we tend to talk about agriculture as a negative thing. So I think when going there is also about, like, what are we asking? What is it that you want to ask them about, and what is the work that we want to do with them? I think yesterday was said, like, you don't transition the fields, right? You transition the mind. So maybe we need to knock and ask other questions when we talk to them, I think.
Yeah, where do you see your future? How can you become more future-proof? How can you become more sustainable? How can you become more resilient? And it will come to the same place. That's such a great point. I don't have a watch, so I don't know how we're doing for time. Okay, we have 5 minutes. I think we had one more question in the front, and maybe we can take one more question in the middle after that, and I think that's time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Annalisa Winther. I'm also part of Top 50 Farmers. Going off of the comment and conversation we just had there, we know in innovation theory that many times it's stronger to build a new system rather than trying to fight the old one and work with all the resistance that's there. You were talking, Tom, before about the need to actually get more sharing happening. And one thing we also know in regenerative theory is that you have islands of regeneration that then connect on a global scale. effectively creating this patchwork quilt that's worked in succession in order to lead change. So I'm wondering, when we're thinking about the farmer perspective, how much we need to connect within local ecosystems versus also connecting on the global scale. Because some of the most powerful farmer stories I've heard being out in the field is when a farmer says, I know the work that I'm doing right here is local, but it's actually global because it impacts the global biosphere, and they're just so aware of that big food system they're a part of. So how do you see that in your work? How are you connected with global conversations versus local ones? Do we not even need to be global because we're just all going to lead to the same place eventually? Like, what's the level of collaboration we actually need to be also making sure we're into?
So with our app, we work with farmers all over the world, or farming organizations as well all over the world. And it's really enriching. Because, there's projects in Australia that resonate with projects in the United States, that resonate with projects in the United Kingdom. And then I'm in the lucky position where I'm able to say, like, oh, I could connect you. And then they have conversations and share their learnings. And it just is that kind of catapult that allows people to move things forward just that bit quicker, I guess, or with more confidence, providing more evidence for why that should be funded. So I think I've seen that the global collaboration is actually really vital. I think we always have to remember that contexts are wildly different in farming. And so it's not just a copy-paste situation. But it is, by building those relationships, you build a resilience, I think, in the system that allows for people to feel connected at a totally different level. But I am curious, because I guess if I just think, because I do some farming in Chile, and despite all my global connections, that doesn't come in that helpful when I'm actually trying to do the farming in Chile. Actually farming, what's most important there are my local relationships with people. And I can, of course, learn things on a global scale, let's say, but to actually make change, it's the local relationships that become unbelievably important. And I can sometimes still feel isolated in Chile, even though I have all these other context relationships abroad. So yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to what Tom thinks on that as well.
One thing that lockdown and COVID did give us was everyone was sat in front of a computer, and you can get a hold of all this knowledge across the entire world, and the opportunity to learn about other people doing the same regen ag principles that we're doing in our context versus their context. The principles are the same the world over. Everyone's got different experiences, but we can all learn from that. And the more people that are taking part in regen ag practices, the bigger impact will become globally, and that is the global connection to it. And you are right. Locally, if you're not connected locally, you are isolated, and then all the fun and the joy's gone out of what you're doing. So as a learning tool and a confidence booster, it's amazing, the global connectivity. But on a local scale, you've got to have that community around you, and that's, for me, one of the best parts of becoming a regen farmer and selling direct is that community. It's everything.
So maybe not scaling, but networking.
I don't really want to scale. I'm quite happy. We're quite happy at the scale we're at. It's something we can manage. We can have impacts. We don't have to rely on other people. We are very keen to work with other people within our farming system. We've got a young lad who's doing no-dig market gardening. We've got somebody who's got bees. We're looking for someone to hopefully do meat chickens and things like that. But giving them opportunity within our farming unit. That's my version of scaling. Is we've got the space. I don't want to grow just cereals. Let's get all these different things on farm that can all benefit each other and really get that circular system working within that farm. We can produce so much food on a small farm. If we stop looking at it as, right, I am a cereal farmer, I am a beef farmer, and you look at it as a whole, we can produce so much more quality food that benefits everybody, benefits the environment, benefits the human health, benefits mindset. That's where it's going forward for me anyway.
Great. Okay, we can have the last question, and then I think we'll have to wrap up.
Yeah, hello there. I'm not a farmer. Since COVID, I've been following the various conservation things. I started a lot of Facebook groups up, and one of them is rewilding and regenerative farming. And I've come here for the second year this time because I'm just fascinated by what regenerative farming can do. But the thing I see with all of this, and there's a lot to learn in regenerative farming, but there are farmer clusters out there, people can talk to one another, but it's all within regenerative agriculture. The thing is, I try and persuade people on and on that look at regenerative farming to get involved with rewilding as well. And what we are seeing is that you're getting lots of groups are joining up together, like Willed to Wave, for example, from NEP. I think regenerative farming has to go out and say to people, we are helping the general conservation, because what happens is that the regenerative farms join up the reserves. And if you want to get better visibility to the general public and say, farmers, we're good, we're helpful, having had years of, oh, it's very negative, I think you need to move the message on that we are part of the conservation group these days.
But that's absolutely crucial. I mean, this is what Regen Ag farms already do, and farm walks and participating in local conservation movements. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I think at least coming also from Denmark, where we have a very strong organic association, is like we all try to collaborate on the theme of healthy soil. So I also sometimes think we can get a little bit of we should maybe move out of how we view like all the labels and talk about healthy soil, right? Nature, healthy soil. So I think there's something in the way we label things and the way we talk about things, because we need to stand together.
I'm going to end at the note that, Regen Ag is all about regenerative landscapes, and that will be people, nature, food, livelihoods, all of this together. I really see a bright future. I'm so excited that this event keeps growing every year. Thank you all for joining us. And yeah, let's build more enthusiasm and let's build more evidence for why this is worthwhile. Thanks.